Welcome to the #1 show and the source of truth for all things MedTech. Here, we reveal the secrets and stories behind the investments, science, and commercialization of the MedTech industry. Every week, we'll take you on a wild ride with the biggest names in the game, from entrepreneurs and investors who are shaking up the market to healthcare providers who are revolutionizing the way we think and practice medicine. So hold on tight and get ready for a journey like no other. This is the State of MedTech. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. And this episode is so unique. This might be the only time you'll ever hear a podcast like this recorded. I really mean that. That's not hyperbole. And so what is this episode about? This episode is about me interviewing a physician who I cold called and did cold outreach with using LinkedIn, and for him to explain his process of what went through his mind, why he took the meeting, why he accepted the technology, what I did right and what I did wrong. You'll never hear that again. And so what is the context? So the context is many years ago, I worked at Potrero Medical. It was a predictive health company with a critical care monitoring system. Essentially, it was capital equipment, but also involved with it was the development of predictive algorithms. Now, using LinkedIn, I was able to profile and find this physician named Dr. Ashish Khanna, who, from my assessment on LinkedIn and also his publications, I identified psychologically that he was an innovator. He fit the specs for the kind of physician who would understand the technology, proliferate its adoption, and in general, that our visions would be aligned, okay? And the result of that engagement a few years later was that he was the principal investigator for a study for Potrero on the predictive algorithms, and that gave way to the FDA giving Potrero breakthrough designation. Breakthrough designation is a process where it's essentially designed to accelerate and expedite the development and review of medical technology and drugs that are intended to treat a very serious condition. And so because of that, Potrero was able to receive FDA breakthrough device designation for Accurate acute kidney injury predict algorithm. A huge win for the company. And so in this interview, I want you to pay very close attention to how Dr. Khanna explains the way that I reached out, why he did certain things, how did he respond? Because in this interview, if you take it to heart and take action on it, you'll be able to be a lot more successful, not only in your outreach with physicians, but have much more fruitful conversations. And if you do a good enough job, if you really focus on the art and science of selling, and more importantly, developing partnerships based on science, you'll have an extremely fruitful career in medical device sales. So I'm so excited to release this. A big thank you to Dr. Ashish Khanna, who agreed to do this. And now let me give you a little bit of background on Dr. Ashish Khanna. Dr. Ashish Khanna is the Associate Professor and Vice Chair for Research and the Director of Perioperative Outcomes and Informatics Collaborative, or POIC Department, Department of Anesthesiology, Section on Critical Care Medicine at Wake Forest School of Medicine. And so with that being said, please be sure to check the show notes below. I'm going to leave Dr. Khanna's LinkedIn profile and his Twitter handle, so be sure to give him a follow. He puts out a lot of great content. So with that, here is our episode with Dr. Ashish Khanna. Enjoy. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. And let me tell you, this has been one in the making. I've been waiting at probably 3 or 4 years to finally have this conversation, and it's going to happen because we're going to show you some really amazing things about how technology adoption happens, what it takes, and how do you find truly innovative physicians who will adopt the technology at the right time. And I'm going to reveal things to my guests that I have never told them before. And so with that being said, I want to introduce my guest. My guest today is Dr. Ashish Khanna. Dr. Ashish Khanna is the Associate Professor and Vice Chair for Research and the Director of Perioperative Outcomes and Informatics Collaborative, POIC, for the Department of Anesthesiology, the Section on Critical Care Medicine at the Wake Forest University School of Medicine. And before we get started, I just want to remind our listeners, if you're a physician or a clinician or a nurse and you're listening to this, guess what? You can get a CME credit from this. That's right. Thanks to our partners over at CMify. Once you listen to this lecture, whether it's on the podcast or on YouTube, click the link below. Take 30 seconds and just write a couple of sentences. What did you learn? And click submit. And like magic, you get an AMA PRA Category 1 CME credit. And if that wasn't good enough, the State of MedTech has also decided to pay for every single one of these. That's right. You're going to get a free CME credit from us because, well, I run this thing, so I get to decide that we do that. So you get a free CME credit. So with that being said, Dr. Khanna, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Omar. I'm as excited about this as you are, and we're going to talk about 3 years ago and now, and I tell you, it's definitely been one in the making. Super excited.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm excited to have you here. And so just to kind of give the punchline, Potrero Medical, which is a predictive health company that is helping physicians predict and prevent things like acute kidney injury before even happening, was working on algorithms, right? And this year they received what is like the holy grail of medtech, which is FDA breakthrough designation. For our listeners listening who are new to this, when you get an FDA breakthrough designation, the FDA is pretty much saying that your device or technology is so vital to patient care that and patient lives that they will fast track it so that it can get to the hands of physicians. Huge. And in that breakthrough, there were 3 universities that were mentioned. One of them, one was Emory University, the other one was Cleveland Clinic, and then the main one was Wake Forest University because Dr. Khanna was the one who was the main principal investigator. And we're going to talk about how that happened. And specifically, I'm going to share for the first time, including with Dr. Khanna, how did I find him and what did I do to get to sort of help orchestrate some of this to happen, or at least set it into motion, you know? So Dr. Khanna, maybe a good place to start was when you decided to adopt the technology. Why did you do it? What about the technology, the company? Like, what were the things that factored in? If you can kind of go back and share that.
Well, Omar, if this is all about being totally candid, I am going to be totally candid, right?
Be very candid, even if it surprises me, good or bad. Okay. I want to hear it.
All right, so here we go. So I know that you were the one who had initially contacted me on LinkedIn, right? I'd heard about Potrero and sort of, you know, the social media feeds that were coming across my LinkedIn and my Twitter. I'd seen the device and you know, it had peripherally caught my eye. You know, in my world, there's devices that come and go every day. There's all kinds of monitoring. I work as an ICU physician and an anesthesiologist, so we live in the world of complex monitoring. A passion of mine is understanding how blood pressure and blood flow affect organ systems, right? And anything that peripherally intersects with the concept of flow perfusion obviously catches my eye. So, you know, looked at my social media feed, and I was like, wow, you know, this looks interesting. Then this guy, Omar Khateeb, you know, reaches out to me and, you know, connects with me on LinkedIn, says, you know, I want to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. And initially, I'm being candid. I was like, well, you know, looks like someone's here to sell the device. and that was my first reaction to him. I was like, oh, listen, I am vice chair for research. My work is research and developing evidence. If you're just looking to place your device in the institution, then I'm probably not the right guy for you. And that was truly my first interaction with him. But you know, credit to Omar. He persevered, and he persevered in a very professional manner. And he said, let's just talk. Can I just have, I think it was like 15 minutes of your time.
Can I share the exact message I sent you? So now this is the part where it's like, I'm going to share how the sausage was made. So I want to reveal exactly what happened. So one is for people who know me, everybody knows that I'm a big student of technology adoption. And so there's psychology that goes into play when it comes to not just early adopters, but an innovator. An innovator means it's a pioneer who you can tell them what the future looks like and they can close their eyes and say, yeah, I see it, right? And so I had, looked around on LinkedIn and I came across you somehow. And when I went to your profile, there was two things that I did that made me say, this is our guy. One is I looked at your LinkedIn profile in terms of what you posted in the past. And there are certain things that you posted that indicated that you were very much about, new technology. I think he had posted something about algorithms. And I was like, okay, that's a very good sign. Then I went and read the things you had actually written, just random posts, comments you made. And I also went and read the last 3 or 4 publications you made. Between those two things, I came to the conclusion, I said, I'm positive this is the right person. And so then what I did was I didn't send you a message originally about it. I think, here we go. On September 11th, 2019, I sent you a message about this webinar that I hosted with Dr. Hung out of University of Michigan, who's in critical care nephrology, right? Then I followed up in March 2022, March 22nd, 2020. Okay, so this is a few months later, we're in the middle of COVID, and this is like an automated message. You had, I think, registered to watch we had a COVID-19 critical care doctor from Wuhan on our show, so I made that. That was wild. And then in September 1st, 2020, right? So this is 1 year later. And the reason why this happened 1 year later is because during the time when I first engaged you, we were in partnership with another company. So there are some limitations on what we can do commercially. But in 2020, we were free, and that was the time where it's like, okay, now it's time to like really get traction and drive the adoption of the product. I sent you one message. I said, hi, Dr. Khanna. I really enjoy your posts. I would love to do a short Zoom with you to learn about your department and interests. Based on your posts, I think you'd really be interested in the technology my company has and the algorithms we are working on for acute kidney injury and abdominal compartment syndrome. What day this week are you free for a short Zoom? I can email you an invite. And your response is, hey, Omar, next week, Monday, Wednesday, or Friday are better days for me. So I want you to take it from there. But because we have a lot of CEOs and salespeople listening, one little tactic I want to share is, aside from reading your posts and learning the language that you personally are interested in, like algorithms was a big one. So I said, I got to make sure to mention algorithms. I did not say, would you like to have a Zoom call? Yes or no? Because the answer would have been just no. I just went straight for it. And I said, what day of the week are you free? You can't answer no to that. You just have to say, oh, it's this day. So that's a little sales tactic. It worked, but I had spent time to thoughtfully engage with you. So that being said, please, now you share candidly like what went through your mind and how did the whole relationship unfold.
Wow, this is crazy.
When have you ever been told this? You've never been told this in your life, right?
And I hope that others will not suffer because you've shared this trade secret with me, because now someone says, when are you free for a Zoom? I might turn around and be like, okay, let's just backpedal here. I never said. The best part, Dr. Khanna, is that I've been talking about this stuff for 7-8 years. 1% of the people actually remember the things I say, and like 1% of the 1% actually even do it, unfortunately. But that's the way the world works. Pareto's principle is alive and well, So absolutely. And Omar, let me just, because we're talking about this, let me just compliment you, because the fact is that some people go through this, I want to meet you, I want to do this, I want to do that. And especially when you're connecting with me on LinkedIn, I usually, after a while, I'm like, let's switch over to my email, because I can't keep going on LinkedIn. And I actually appreciated the fact internally that you had a Zoom meeting ready for me, right? Rather than saying, hello, this is me. Nice to see you. Well, great. But you had a Zoom meeting ready for me. Plus the fact that you clarified right away that there is no upfront sales pitch here, that you are meeting me for what you have seen of me and that you want to discuss evidence and science. And for our listeners and viewers, guys, I will tell you that our first meeting, I was pretty much blown away. I immediately said, well, where were these people all this while? Because I keep saying that hypotension matters, but my hypotension equation is incomplete. And that, this product makes total sense to complete my equation, and that we will be the perfect site to do work with them. And that led to a lot of, sort of development of evidence that
I
Omar
love
will
this.
talk about.
And again, like my whole mission of what I do is I want to make this industry, the industry of medicine and technology, better, because these kind of conversations can happen. And, there's nothing wrong with being a salesperson, but there's a way to do it, which is, again, for me, having spent time in medical school, my father's a surgeon. I spent a lot of time appreciating the culture of medicine. The culture of medicine is based on these conversations of science, technology, and clinical evidence. That's where you have to start. And so before I even went for an ask, and I would say, like, even though about 9 to 12 months elapsed, in reality, like, if I really decided I wanted to reach out to Dr. Khanna sometime in the spring of 2020, and then we had our meeting in August and September, right? But before I even asked anything, I went and spent time reading his faculty profile. I remember I printed out your publications. I highlighted, I read them. I think I went back like 10 years even, because I was like, okay, how did this guy even start his career? What is he interested in? That's when I learned. And again, I didn't know this at the time, but when you study enough, you're able to pick this up, that Dr. Khanna came out of the Cleveland Clinic. The Cleveland Clinic is a powerhouse when it comes to publishing and research. When I look at scientists, I look at it just the same way as when somebody watches like the NFL or NBA and like drafts happen. So then I was like, I bet you because Wake Forest, no offense to Wake Forest, at the time wasn't known as like a powerhouse for research. And I was like, I bet you they recruited this guy out of Cleveland Clinic, and now he's the head of this department there to do the same thing. And lo and behold, that's essentially what he was recruited for, and that's what he did. We're gonna do a webinar about that in the near future. But I learned all these things so that even if nothing happened from that meeting, it was an enjoyable experience for Dr. Khanna. Am I wrong about anything I just said? Am I off on anything?
No. You're absolutely right, Omar, and clearly you did your homework, and you did your homework well. And like with any other first meeting, if the other person comes across as someone who's done his or her homework, then it helps, right? Because otherwise you spend a 30-minute meeting, like 25 minutes out of 30 minutes, just trying to provide appropriate background, and then you're left with 5 minutes to, kind of move forward. With us, when we met the first time, you really hit the ground running. So I really felt that, these guys, and they know what they're talking about. And I think that makes a huge difference in medicine, because we, like I said, again, no offense to device companies, as you well know, there is a device company everywhere these days, right? So, but we want to also focus on the winners, even amongst the startups, right? And it's very easy, my hair are not gray yet, but I've definitely lost some hair. As you start losing some hair, you develop that wisdom to pick up those nuanced things that separate the boys from the men, so to
absolutely.
speak, right? So, and even within the world of startups, right? And believe it or not, I have a little, mental filter when I am talking to people. I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is just not going to go anywhere. And then there's others where I disconnect. I'm like, wow, these people mean business, and this is going to advance.
Share a little bit more. And I was going to say, this is also an important concept. I want my listeners, because I talk about this all the time, I want them to hear it from you. But I always tell listeners, like, you have to be empathetic, put yourself in the position of the physician, because if they're going to go and use political capital to push for technology, they need to be right. Otherwise, they've lost face with their department, their hospital. Tell us more about how you determine that with a company, and why is that so important? All right, buddy, quick commercial break. And I wanted to share something that isn't going to resonate with most people. But if you are a med rep who's sick and tired of dealing with the way things are, where you're left without access, you can't sell to doctors, it's harder. Maybe you're a sales leader and you're frustrated, right, with the fact that your team is struggling to grow pipeline, or maybe you're a medtech startup CEO or founder who's trying to attract investors and actually get commercial traction so you can raise some money. In any case, I want you to listen closely. During the pandemic, I found myself in a very similar position. So I was working with a really cutting edge medtech startup, and we were selling a high-end piece of capital equipment. We had a partnership with the world's largest privately held medtech company, who was our distribution partner. That ended, right? And we were left with a tiny sales team of 4 people. Plus, as you can tell from the date, hospitals went on complete lockdown, and to make matters even worse, we were running out of money, literally, right? So it seemed like a death sentence for our company, but the CEO at the time was a really visionary one, and he had faith in me and allowed me to test this extremely revolutionary digital medical sales strategy. Okay, what was the outcome? In just 60 days, I managed to add a staggering 35 deals to pipeline, deals like Johns Hopkins, UCSF, HCA facilities, right? All while handling our marketing efforts, right? This led to a beautiful slide that showed a fully packed pipeline, helped us raise $15 million during that raise. And then 2 years later, because of a couple of the physicians who I was able to engage during that process, they led a study that gave us FDA breakthrough designation 2 years later. So this strategy not only packed pipeline at scale, but also helped attract investors, develop the slide that helped us raise money, and a few years later, give us that ability to leverage into an FDA breakthrough designation. So what was my secret weapon? Well, what I leveraged was network effects on social media, specifically places like LinkedIn, but also using email and video, right? And other platforms that physicians often use that captures their attention, persuades them, and then essentially get them into a virtual demo and propel them through a sales funnel. Now I created an exclusive program called the Medical Sales Network Effects Program to share this strategy with you and connect you with other innovators. The Medical Sales Network Effects Program is online content and training, plus a private network, plus ongoing live calls to keep you at the very edge of innovation and strategy, whether you're a medtech CEO and founder or even a sales rep, right? As an example, 2 weeks ago, we covered how to use ChatGPT in medical sales messaging through email. Maybe 1% of the world is using ChatGPT, and 0.01% of that is salespeople, and those salespeople are in my program. Imagine what unlocking those kinds of insights and strategies could do for you, your team, your company, and don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your career and take your company to a new height. So if you're interested to learn more, check the show notes below and watch the webinar that I recorded on this topic so that you can understand the full strategy and see if you qualify. Or go to my website, khateebandco.com. That's KHATEEB as in boy, ANDCO.com, and then learn more there. Now, let's get back to the episode. Use political capital to push for technology. They need to be right, otherwise they've lost face with their department, their hospital. Tell us more about how you determine that with a company, and why is that so important?
Yes, that's an important question. So I'm glad we're talking about it. I guess in my world, and everyone has their own little mental algorithm as they're thinking through this. I understand, and everyone does, that startups don't have millions of dollars to shell out for large randomized trials, right? I am actually very, very empathetic to that. But what separates people with a vision or not is being honest to themselves and honest to the person they're talking about. In this case, if you're talking to a clinician scientist like me, be honest about the science and say, here is our device. This is what we've done so far. Here are the deficiencies with evidence, because believe me, no startup comes out of the box and says, oh, I have the perfect device with minimal deficiencies. No, that's not how. If that was the case, then we would not need these partnerships, right? So be honest and say, this is where we are. These are our deficient areas with science, and here is where we see potential collaboration in building science together. Watch my words here. I said building science together, not imposing your science on me, but building science together. Everyone wants to build together. If you have come to me, let's build together and let's try and work so we can specifically tailor research to help your device overcome those black holes, so to speak, those areas of deficient evidence, right? And that's the kind of wording I like to hear, because that tells me that this device company is really interested in taking their device from like a little whatever baby device to something that will be a major player in the market, right? And I always tell people, in fact, I've written an editorial about this, that there's sort of 3 stages to device development. One is validation of data, which means that is your device nearly as good as the gold standard? The second thing is interventional outcome trials. And the third thing is implementation science. So taking your device to the market and making sure that the end user understands and uses the device as it was supposed to be used. If you guys, or not you guys, but if anyone who's talking to me understands the value in that stepwise approach, then we're talking. And I'm not one to ever say, oh, we need to do a 20,000 patient randomized control trial right away. That'll, you'll need $15 million from an investor and then come back to me. I actually always say, where can we start? Let's build some pilot data. Let's get you to the next step. And then we'll advance this further. That's my modus operandi. Obviously, everyone has a slightly different way of doing it, but you asked me, so I was just being very honest about it.
Do you remember because this I actually did. I wish I recorded, but I didn't. The first time we met, I don't remember if it was just you and I, or you and I and one of our engineers. But do you remember the first meeting? Like what was specifically said to you, and how did it make you feel that made you say, yeah, you know what, I'm willing to move to the next step to learn more and explore what this is like? Can you share more of that?
So you and I had a first meeting that was, you told me a little bit about the device, and then and I said, well, this makes perfect sense. Let's just come back with your technical team and the rest of your team. And then we got on a Zoom where we had the other members of your team, including your other consultants and KOLs. And again, while I'm being candid, I think that, by the way, makes a difference as well. So at that time, your KOL came from some very reputed institutions and had done some amazing work with some initial data, and he showed me that data during that call, and that for me really checked off several check boxes in my head, saying there's not only a device, there's someone who knows the science, who's already working with them at a very reputable institution and has this data. In fact, I remember that at the end of that call, I had already come back with 10 ideas on what we could do with this device.
And it's coming back to me as well. And so again, showing how the sausage is made. So the first call we did, so again, the mistake that a company does is it's like too fast, too soon. And, to be honest with you, the analogy I use, this is just like dating. Like when I met my wife, the first date we went on wasn't this like very extravagant, dinner, I don't know, all these things. That happened rather quickly too, because I fell in love with my wife. But the first call Dr. Khanna and I had, I didn't invite my entire team. I didn't invite KO, because what's really awkward, and I've seen salespeople do this, is that they get a doctor who is, like Dr. Khanna, sits very high in a university. It's like, oh, this person's interested. Let me bring out all the big guns and the big players. So you get like your product manager, your head of product, a KOL, you get on. And when you talk to the doctor, and the doctor you schedule a meeting with is like, yeah, not for me. You've now not only wasted your time, it's pretty embarrassing. The second thing is you've wasted a lot of money. And a lot of people are like, oh, but it's a Zoom call. Well, think about the money it took to coordinate and have the head of product, maybe your CEO, maybe this other KO, all to carve out the schedules, which, by the way, there's coordination with all this. So you're spending time and money trying to coordinate the schedules to get on a call to essentially just come to the conclusion this is not the right person. So what I do with Dr. Khanna and what I do with every other doctor, even in my current program, now I'm selling to medical device companies. I think you and I, we scheduled, it wasn't an hour call. I think it was a 15-minute Zoom call, right? So that way it's easier to say yes. We get on. And I believe I walked you through, it was, and now it's coming back actually now. It was like maybe an 8 or 10, I think it was, did I walk you through a slide deck or did I just talk to you? Do you remember?
You mostly just talked to me.
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. Because again, it was what's this lowest barrier of entry? So when we got on the call, I had a script, and I think it was maybe 2 or 3 minutes where I walked through again, not the company. I started with here's the problem we're solving: acute kidney injury and interabdominal pressure. This was a big interest for Dr. Khanna. How we're solving it, what we're doing, and I try to. All right, so like I've never told a doctor this actually, so this is kind of exciting. I focused on the problem and pain we're solving today, which is something that would, if it was interesting to you, it would get your attention, right? Talked about the vehicle that we're using to solve that problem. So in this case, continuous monitoring, and using predictive health, right? But then I used the future, which once you talk about the future, the imagination is stimulated, and that's where a lot of interest because I could say, oh, you can do this, you can do that, versus if you try and use an imagination of the future, the end user is able to start thinking about what's interesting to them, which is probably why on the second call you came back with all these ideas. I didn't try and guess what things would be. And so by doing that, right, I was able to quickly assess and say, yeah, you know what? Based on what I'm hearing from him, I can hear the interest in his voice. There's some excitement, right? And then I could say, yeah, if I have a call with Dr. Khanna for an hour with other people who are really important, it's going to be a very, very good use of our time. And even if it, for whatever reason, it wouldn't work out, at the very least, I could tell that this gentleman is interested in what we do and is excited by it. He could at the very least give us some really valuable feedback at the bare minimum, right? That's the way to, would you agree with that approach?
Absolutely. And the key point was, Omar, that not once did you say, oh, can we come to Wake Forest and would you just trial some of our devices? That, by the way, and again, there's the right person. If you're talking to someone in procurement and device procurement, I think that's obviously the right approach. But my message is tailored to your audience, so know who you are talking to. And right, like you said, just because you know Ashish Khanna in the Department of Anesthesia at Wake Forest doesn't mean that
it's a shortcut.
The device is automatically sold at Wake Forest.
Exactly.
In fact, I actually tell all device companies that there's a big firewall between me and the people who are going to ultimately buy the device from you, and rightfully so. Because if I'm going to get research grants from you and funding to do trials, and if I also try and make the institution buy the device, that is a huge conflict of interest right there, right outside of everything else. So yes, I will be your, I'll be your trump card, so to speak. If you do the trial with me and you go out in the world and you take that paper and it has my name as first author, hopefully, my name and the quality of the research will help you, not just at Wake Forest, but everywhere else in the country and the world. That is my support for you. Not that, I'm the person who does the research and I'm the person who signs the check and gives you and buys the equipment from you. That, again, is a misconception. And people sometimes get messed up in those relationships, and those relationships are poles apart, and rightfully so.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely. And the last thing I would mention for founders and salespeople, if you have this process where you're very disciplined, but you're also very thoughtful about the engagement that you're about to have. And again, I'm a little disappointed. I have to remind people this, but I'm going to say this: you're not selling a set of knives to some random person in the street. You're dealing with a physician who's gone through multiple years of heavy graduate level education. Like, it's a very sophisticated person. So you're not going to get them excited and they're going to run to their hospital and say, I need you to buy this technology now. Like, it does not happen. There was a time many decades ago where that would happen, but we live in a much different world now. You can't do that anymore. So even, whether the first call that I spoke to you on, where I was just trying to gauge, like, am I right in my hypothesis? Again, scientific approach. I had an hypothesis about you. I tested it. I was correct. And I said, okay, it makes sense to move to the next step. Whether on the first call when I talk to you or the second call, let's say we come to the conclusion where I'm like, either this is not the right person or they, for whatever reason, they have a conflict. They're not going to work with us. At the very least, since I developed the relationship the right way, the next thing, so that it's just not a lost cause, and I had this in my my little business algorithm, is I would have just said, hey, Dr. Khanna, totally understand this is not like maybe the right fit for you, but if you don't mind helping me, is there another physician that you went to training with, or maybe in your peer group, that you feel like they would really like this device? You don't have to make the introduction. So that's a tip. I always say you don't have to make the introduction. So it gets them off the hook. But usually as a result of doing that, most people say, oh, let me make the introduction. Like, who would it be? So that way, now you're thinking at a much larger level.
Yeah.
And I think the physician would respect you a lot for that, because it's like, oh, I just told this person that for whatever reason I'm not interested in everything, and they're not putting the pressure on to make me change.
Yes, and I do want to spend a minute talking about this last very important point for all device companies, is understanding who does what and where that device fits in terms of an area of clinical interest and development of science. A lot of times I've seen sort of device companies sort of barking up the wrong tree, right? So you have a device that is very closely tied to hemodynamics, pressure, and flow. You should be reaching out to a peer group of clinician scientists who work in the area of blood pressure, blood flow, intra-abdominal pressure, fluids, and so on. So these would be anesthesiologists, critical care physicians, cardiac anesthesiologists, and possibly cardiac surgeons as well, right? I'm just talking about this particular example, right? If you go off the wrong way, you're going to waste a lot of your time talking to people who might say, oh, great, this is interesting, but you know what? I don't really work in this area. It doesn't really mean that much to me. Whereas if you talk to a critical care doctor or an anesthesiologist or a perioperative physician about blood pressure and flow, most of us are jumping off our seats to talk about that, right? Because the world we live in and day out, right? And sometimes it's difficult for device companies to understand that, because a device doesn't have it written on it like, oh, these are the people who are going to be interested in this device, right? A device goes by organ system. A device doesn't really go by the understanding of who works in that area. And that's where what you just said, even if it doesn't work for me, if you've established a good relationship with me, I'll be like, okay, listen, I know 6 other people who are working in this area who'll be happy to talk to you. And those connections are mission critical, because every device company needs to establish a inner circle of sort of confidants, of experts, of who will support them, who will work with them, and who will work for mutual benefit. It's very important to identify that early on in the piece, because then if you don't, then you're taking several wrong steps and you'll have to backtrack and start
100%. And just, again, I know you have a flight to catch, so we really appreciate you coming on the show. But just to kind of reiterate, like, the biggest thing about this is, and again, I'll quote my late and great mentor, Chris Sells, who passed away a couple years ago. You got to be the student of the game. You have to spend time to really not just study the people that you're trying to help. Notice I said help, not sell to, right? Selling does happen. It's a byproduct of really understanding a problem and helping. But look, you live in a day and age where all this information is at your fingertips. I didn't talk to anybody even. I was able to look up every publication Dr. Khanna had. I was able to look him up on LinkedIn and Twitter, see the things he was actually liking, see the language he was using. So that way, in the process, I can assess, is this the right person for me to talk to? And if I do talk to him, at the very least, make it a pleasant and enjoyable experience for him, you know? So that being said, Dr. Khanna, I know for a fact this episode is going to get listened to a lot, and people are going to want to have you back on to dive deeper in it. So I hope we can have you back on. But we're definitely doing that webinar. I want to hear how you essentially in the last few years turned Wake Forest into the research powerhouse it's become. So I hope you can, come back on and share that. Okay.
Omar, Khateeb, let me tell you that I do some podcasting on the side as well, and I think I'm going to need some lessons from you in how to develop a podcasting relationship.
Let me be your manager, man. I'm going to make you a star.
All right. Let's talk after we
Absolutely. Stay on for a second and we'll chat. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. Again, if you're a clinician, click the link below. Claim that CME credit, the AMA PRA Category 1 credit. Thanks to our partners at CMFI. It takes 30 seconds. Write a few sentences and you get it for free. I'm your host and head of state, Omar M. Khateeb, and this is the State of MedTech. We'll see you next time. Thank you for enjoying another epic episode of the State of MedTech. If you're feeling inspired and love this episode, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you never miss an episode. And be sure to give us 5 stars and write a short review because that helps more people discover this amazing community of ours. If you're a company who has an executive that you'd like to be on the show, or perhaps you want to sponsor one of the episodes, shoot us an email at hello@khateebandco.com. Take care, and we'll see you next time.